So one of the things that I've always tried to do in my classroom is to let the classroom tell a story. And usually I want it to be the student's story. And different teachers do that different ways. Some people fill their walls with student work. And there are occasions where I'll do that, but most of the time I want to fill it with the props of their life in my classroom. And so there are certain things that will make it on the wall. That each of those things has a story. And almost rarely does it come from when classroom starts to when classroom finishes. It usually comes from things that the students have done in my class outside of class time. An example would be, next to the speaker for the PA system, there's a plastic fork, and it's just taped there. And every year I get new groups of students, and the students will ask me about the fork. And my answer is usually, well, that's a parking lot issue, and if there's ever a time at the end of class where there's 2 or 3 minutes, and you guys have finished your lesson, and you ask me, I'll tell you about the fork. And so it also becomes something they have to wait for. And so it takes on this mythic kind of sense about it. Like, why is that fork so important that it's taped there, and why won't he tell us about it today? And I'm going to tease you by not telling you the story of the fork today, other than to say that there are things like the fork all over the classroom, and that it's about encouraging the kids to find a story in their life. And for Elena and Jenna, the two whose story goes with that fork, every time they see it or they remember back to that fork, they'll know that they had that story and that they made that story in my classroom. I took a group of students to Monterey, and we went to the National Steinbeck Center, and we went to the aquarium, and we toured Cannery Row. And in the evening of the second day we were there, we went and we saw a belly dance performance. And the boys who went with us were expecting beautiful, young, exotic belly dancers that they could be excited about. And so they were like, yeah, let's go see belly dancing. But what we were at was really a belly dancing studio where students would come in and learn, and they were kind of exhibiting what they've learned. And so it was everyday people belly dancing. And my boys were immediately turned off once the show started. And I leaned over to Stewart and I said, if you're not having the time of it here, find a story in it. And he had heard me say that in the past, and he knew of the fork and things like that. And so he was like, find a story in this. And he said, well, Mr. Reynolds, I can complain about how boring it was. And I said, no, that's not the story that we want to tell. I said, find a story about your life that's exciting. And there came a moment where the woman who ran the studio thanked us and our class for coming in, because we were about a third of the audience, and we had just shown up, and they were really happy to have us. And she said, "No, it's great that we've got these students from Mount Tabella High School here." And Stewart took that moment to let her know that several of our students had practiced belly dance back at school. He said, "Yeah," he said, "they've done it too." And so she invited our students up there. And 2 of our girls rose to the occasion. They ran out to the car. They got the CD that they had danced to. They went backstage where they were given some costume pieces, and they came out 6 minutes later and danced the dance that they had learned 6 months prior. And I was really proud of them because they showed me that they were truly performers. In a way, I was really proud of Stewart because he'd made the story. I think that one of the ways that I make a difference for my students is that I empower them to see the stories in their lives. That while they're in my classroom, they can craft a story about them as students. But I also encourage them to craft a story about themselves as people. And that the things that they do outside of the classroom, I want them to bring into the classroom. So there's always opportunities for them to write into their journal about the adventures that they've had, or to turn the regular everyday sorts of things into adventures, and to really show them how they can craft that story. And I think that part of it is because I love telling stories, but I think the larger part of it is I love hearing other people tell their stories. And I remember being a kid and thinking, well, I'm never going to be as cool as Kurt Vonnegut because I just can't tell a story the way that he can. And when I truly came to realize that it's not about me telling a story like Kurt Vonnegut. It's about me telling a story like me. And that what I get to do, and one of the ways that I make a difference for my students in that classroom, is by encouraging them to tell a story about them, and to tell it in the way that they want. And I saw Stewart do it, and Jenna and Elena tell the story about that fork, and for every one of those things that hangs on the wall in my classroom, there's a student who has a story. And for every day, my students understand that they can be crafting a story as well.
Very nice.
Okay.